Hey there. It's Kelly O'Connell, author and attorney with Knockout Podcasts. And I've got a story for you here today, which occurred to me last night. I was working on the show last night, and it suddenly, and I was talking to my friend Olivia, when it occurred to me that the police not only screwed up, but they screwed up massively. And I wanted to get into that. All right, why do I say that? So Brian and his girlfriend Gabby were driving across the United States, and they got to Utah. And everybody knows that they were pulled over by the police because someone had seen an altercation. And so Gabby was crying, and they talked to both. They separated them and talked to both. And Brian had scratches on his neck, and they asked what happened. And, you know, he said, whatever, she got a little emotional. Well, he didn't want to press charges. And so they decided to separate him and have him sleep apart for one night. It was claustrophobic in the van and everything. All right. Here's the problem. There was one of the witnesses who stated that he saw Brian put hands on Gabby. And so this could have easily led to an arrest of Brian. Now, the cops wanted to be nice guys, right? Then later, Gabby said, you know, I did put my hands on him. Neither one of them wanted an arrest. But the fact of the matter is, the police had everything they needed to arrest these two, or at least one of them. Say they arrest Gabby, and then she goes in jail, and she gets out, and she got to hang around and, you know, live in the van locally until the court comes to trial. And maybe the police arrest her and then find out that the evidence seems to indicate that he was the one. Well, they could dismiss charges against her and put them on Brian. But there was another event that somebody saw, an argument, I believe it was in an Italian restaurant, and it ended up with them yelling at the server. And the people who had observed it thought it was really just completely out of line. So, should the police have arrested either Brian or Gabby in Utah? And absolutely they should have. You know, because they would have uncovered a bigger crime. And you might say, well, they didn't know there was a bigger crime. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. And they could have at least done some investigation. Now, easy. As soon as Gabby turns up missing and it's in the national news, and Brian is supposedly back in Florida, Utah should have charged him with domestic violence. All right, why? What difference does it make? He's already gone. You know, he's probably not going to return for this. The reason is you do this is it gives the police a way to arrest Brian, to bring him into the police headquarters and to interview him. Now, that might not sound like such a big deal, but that could make all the difference in the world. You have a way to get him in there, and then you can interview him. You can go through his stuff. Now, you might say, well, it's not for murder. That's not the point. The point is you get something out there on this guy, and it would have been Utah helping Florida, especially when they realized that they screwed up. They could have made up for it a little bit by putting this arrest warrant out there that allows the police to go and take in Brian and start this process. And who knows what he would have said when he got there. You know, we realize he's pleading the fifth. They're trying to plead the fifth, but the real fact of the matter is that, you know, by the time they realized it, she's already dead, undoubtedly, but he's still around, or seems to be around. All right. Now, when they go up to Wyoming, they she ends up dead near the Grand Tetons, and then he leaves with her van. So Wyoming could have filed for abuse of a corpse because he was the last person around her. Now, you might say, well, how would they prove that? How they can't prove? Isn't that the same as proving murder? No, my argument would be she's there. Let's just say at that moment they didn't know how she died, but he certainly abandoned her. And as a dead body, he didn't call anybody. He didn't report it to the authorities. He just left. And so you charge him under that. Now, what if it doesn't stick? That's not the point. The point is the arrest warrant gives the police a reason to pull this guy over instead of prematurely charging him for murder in this case, at which point they really couldn't prove it at that time, and which he might get out on. And then you've got this third charge that I thought of is when he returns to Florida, he's driving her van. Now, she was already dead, and he undoubtedly had authorization previously to drive the van, but the van is in her name. She owns it. He doesn't have, I would assume, he doesn't have express or written permission to drive it. So, if she knew that he was going to kill her and then drive her van off, she would have said no. So, the point being that they could put out, Florida itself could have put out a charge on that unsanctioned use of a motor vehicle. And any one of these charges could then be used to arrest him and bring him in. Now, might not seem like much, but sometimes the big case is solved by a little step that turns into a big step. So, you've got Brian, who wherever he was sneaking into the swamp, and I think that his family left. They had basically a type of camper, and you've seen these campers all over the United States. Campers with their slide-in campers or their topper campers. You put them into a truck, then they fill up the bed, and then they go up a little bit higher and come over the top of the cab. And they had one of those, and they took a trip. Now, this is the day before it was announced that Gabby was missing, so the timing couldn't have been more brilliant. Brian and his parents took off in this, and what do I think happened? Well, I had said in yesterday's show, I thought that Brian could quite easily be in the Caribbean. And how would that happen? Well, like a friend of mine told me, half the people in Florida have boats, and these boats are many of them are pleasure boats, but another part of them are work boats. And they could have rented out a boat for a trip to Cuba, which might be a little bit hard to get in. But I had mentioned yesterday, St. Kitts and Nevis has an actual program. If you go there and you have enough cash, you can buy your citizenship, and you're supposed to buy land that's worth at least $200,000 and stay for, I think it is 7 months or something, or maybe it was 3 months. But they could have gone to a number of different island nations, and made some sort of an agreement that Brian would come on there and they'd give him money, and then it leads to the issue that the United States, once they find he's out there, if they do, then has a hell of a time getting an extradition order to get him out of there. And he could gain months or years. He might not ever come back. If he went to Cuba, let's say Brian's parents hired a boat to take him to Cuba, and they made a negotiation with the military, and it's all about money, obviously, but they're not going to extradite him out of Cuba. So something like this could actually cause this case to never be solved fully, or at least never be adjudicated, never be punished, and I think it's terrible. The mistakes by the cop, and there have been a lot others, but the ones that I have mentioned were, I think, the ones that immediately came to mind. But I mean, obviously the FBI was thinking along the same lines. How do we get an arrest warrant to stop this guy? And that's how you have to do it. Al Capone once said you can't get in trouble for not paying taxes on illegal income. But actually that's what happened, is they went after him. They couldn't get any charges to stick otherwise, and they prosecuted him and convicted him of tax evasion, and then he died in prison, I believe, of syphilis, when he's still a fairly young guy. So, and that's a mafia. So anyway, I want to just throw this out there. The cops made mistakes, and just like everybody else, cops make mistakes. But I think it was a systemic, it shows a lack of creative thinking and a lack of going after this crime at the highest level. And if you can get an angle on something like this, it helps. But up to this point, it seems like the Laundries have outthought the police in Northport, Florida, the state police, and the FBI. And it really is a terrible feeling that person can get away with murder like that. So anyway, I do think it's important to support the police, but at the same time, you got to call them out when they screw up. So I'm going to do a show tomorrow on what the lawyer probably told Brian Laundrie that changed the history of this case and gave them the chance of making it on their own out of this and into a place where they could actually beat the charges by never showing up. So in any event, I'll do a little bit of weird news for you right now. But instead of weird news today, I want to focus a little bit on this volcano that's going off in the Canary Islands, which are Spanish islands that are off the upper portion on the west side, the west coast of Africa. And they're famous for being a beautiful place to vacation. All right, now this is from the Smithsonian, and I wondered how many volcanoes are going off now. It seems like there's 3 or 4 going off in Alaska. There's some that are going down in Central America. And it just started to feel like there were a lot of volcanic eruptions. There was one in the Caribbean that went off that caused a lot of problems. And now there's this one that's going off in the Canary Islands. So you've got 50 volcanoes going off right now. And looking to see the ones that are going off in the United States. Pavlov, which is in Alaska. Great Sitkin, which is in Alaska. Semisopochnoi is in Alaska. And let's see, Saunders. I'm trying to remember where Saunders is at. So we've got 4 going off, and it's in the Antarctic. So it's supposed to be in the United Kingdom, but I see it here. Oh, okay. That's the problem. United Kingdom instead of United States. So we've got 3 volcanoes going off. Now, you've got couple in Indonesia, 3 or 4 in Indonesia, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I looked it up, and it said that that's not an unusual number of volcanoes going off, but this one that was going off and I think it's called La Palma volcano in the Canary Islands is just spectacular, and they showed it going off, and it was in an area that they didn't think there was going to be an eruption, so that threw them off. And then it went into the town, and now it's headed towards the sea, and they say if this lava flow goes into the sea, it could create acid rain. So it's also showed with drones how the volcano, the lava is pouring into houses and lighting them on fire. But it also went into a couple of pools, and it was really spectacular. These volcanic boulders falling in somebody's pool, and all of a sudden it's just chaos and steam and everything. So anyway, I did some research on that. We're not in an unusual amount of eruptions, but it seems like it, just for the purposes of how we look at it. And there's also a question which I'll leave for you, whether there is an unusual number of volcanoes that are erupting in the Ring of Fire right now. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, Kelly O'Connell, and give me a thumbs up, give me a subscription, and let's keep going on this story and a lot of other stories. You're listening to Knockout Podcasting with Kelly O'Connell. Kept it short for you today. Hope you have a great one, and leave your comments in the section. Give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you soon. Ciao.